One man was bigger than life on late-night TV for decades, and another man spent his whole career living in that shadow. It was great to see Johnny Carson. David Letterman was the clear choice to take over. We thought that was all. Now that he's 78, David is finally telling the truth, but fans didn't expect it. A lot of people say it's pretty bad. This movie shows the private parts of a complicated relationship between two famous people. It shows the laughter, the silence, and the private moments that no one saw because there was something much more personal going on behind the jokes. This is what David Letterman thinks about Johnny Carson after talking about him. The Prince and the King. A long time ago, every American comedian's dream was to be able to sit across from Johnny Carson. That one moment on The Tonight Show could change your whole life. The desk, the couch, the laugh. It did for David Letterman. When David first came on the show in 1978, it was for a crowning. It was clear from the time he walked out onto Carson's stage that they would get along. Johnny could tell how tall or short someone was. With a look, he could take away your weapons, raise you up, or lower you down. But David was different. He had a spark. Johnny laughed again and again. He became bright. That meant everything to David. Johnny was the person who let people into the world of late night. He set fashion and made kings. His acceptance was the last sign that you were ready to play in the major leagues. The phone started to ring once you had it. Agents called, club dates tripled, and studios paid attention. That was his power. David was aware of this. David didn't just want Johnny to laugh, though. He wanted to deserve that laugh. He paid attention to his timing, the pauses, and how he let a joke breathe. Other comics tried to cool Johnny off, but David tried to get to know him. People were respectful, and it was almost like seeing a master at work. Johnny wasn't just a comedian, he was a giant. After David's first show, Johnny asked him to come back, again and again. He was sure he saw something, a brain that worked sideways like his own, a dryness, an edge. David didn't have as much slick style. He did not try to get praise. Johnny saw that he let the people in the crowd come up to him. There was talk going on behind the scenes, but Johnny wasn't there. A lot of what he said was hidden from everyone except the people who produced, wrote, and read the tea leaves. They knew Johnny wasn't likely to do work for them again, and they also knew that when he smiled in a certain way, it meant more than just laughing. It meant he saw something good in it. In the early 1980, David started hosting The Tonight Show as a guest. Many people saw him for the first time in a long time behind a desk, not just on the couch. It all made sense. He was smart, funny, and sometimes even weird, but in a way that made him feel real, like he wasn't trying to be Carson but was taking on some of his traits. David didn't copy, though. He borrowed money politely, he liked it. But when his own show Late Night started in 1982, it was not the same. It was strange, silly, and sometimes even against the format Johnny had mastered. David put things to the ground below houses. He sneered as he read the fan mail. He kept quiet as if it were fog. But even though he was rebelling, the bass was still there. Johnny had an effect on everything. The single-liner, the helper, the desk, and the first band. It wasn't just a custom. They were buildings of worship. Even though David was rude, he never tore down the walls, he only changed the color of them. Their relationship was private and quiet. There wasn't a normal friendship between them. They did not take a trip together. You didn't get calls on your birthday, but they had a bond based on mutual respect. It was like they could talk to each other through telepathy, because they knew how hard it was to make millions of people laugh 5 nights a week. And yet David never quite got over the feeling that he was still a student or an apprentice. It was like he was talking about Johnny in public, like he was talking about a ghost that was bigger than life and impossible to fully explain. In interviews, he said that he had shaped not only his work but also his whole view on comedy and TV. A lot of the time, when asked what made a good host, David would just look to Johnny and say, "Johnny." The story went on for decades, with Johnny as the master and David as the chosen one. It was true in many ways. Even though Johnny was no longer working, his shadow was still big. It was clear in the way David walked, the way he told jokes, and the way he let a moment linger. That wasn't necessary. He decided to do it because the master had shown him how to do it. The link was also felt by the audience. There was some comfort in seeing the torch pass, even though it wasn't done properly. Johnny never said anything important. Even though he didn't praise David on radio or in public, The way he acted said it all. He asked him to take a seat. He let him fill in. David will always remember how he kept him close. But what he had was even more rare by the time he got to network TV. He didn't need a guide anymore. Someone saw him and opened the door just enough to let him in. That was enough to make a name for himself and leave a lasting impression. It looked like that, at least. David finally told the whole truth about Johnny and what he had to say when he was 78 years old. It's not really good, the tragedy. In 1992, late-night TV went to war with itself, not with the numbers or with the people who ran the networks. After 30 years, the throne that had ruled American humor was finally empty. The public chess match to see who would sit on it became very heated. David believed he knew the answer. Most of America did too, but the network had something else in mind. David had been groomed by NBC for years as the next president. The critics looked up to him, the buzz in the business and the history. It was no longer a surprise when a guest hosted The Tonight Show. It had become normal. In a quiet way, even Johnny had shown his acceptance by bookings, body language, and staying quiet when it would have been easy to support someone else. But the network was tense. David was very smart, for sure, but he was hard to guess. He didn't make things better. He wasn't good at getting along with people in business. His snark was like armor on him. The executives didn't like his sharp, self-aware, and sometimes rude type of comedy. After that, there was Jay Leno. It was safe, easy to relate to Jay. His chin was made for making fun of people, and his delivery was made for the Midwest. What's more, he played the game. He stayed near the suits. He didn't make noise. There were a lot of him that NBC could sell. Things got bad behind the scenes. As agents circled, stories spread. The leaders lied to each other. There was a knife fight in the back room during what should have been a polite transfer. There was no way to tell who was telling the truth and who was lying. After that, the choice was made. Jay would take over The Tonight Show. David was shocked. He didn't try to hide it. He didn't even try. This was different for a man who generally hid his feelings under 10 layers of irony. It hurt a lot, and not just because of the job. It hurt because of what it stood for. It was about trust, about how years of loyalty failed to mean anything at all. He thought about staying. NBC tried to keep him by giving a late-night compromise, but he turned them down. That was a promotion with a wink. He left because of this. He went across the street to work for CBS. It was a huge move. He was going to do more than start a new show. In his new business, he would be going up against the show that made him famous, the network that turned him down, and the person who took his place. This was the first episode of The Late Show with David Letterman, which aired in August 1993. A new war, a new set, and a new tone. Both the press and the public ate it up. The odds were on his side for a while. The country had chosen a side. JV's David, smooth versus rough, popular versus counterculture. But there was something more going on than just the numbers race. David lost something important. The one thing he was sure of was gone, and it showed. You could see it in his eyes when he first started The Late Show. The edge was still there, but the pain was still there. There was a new bite to interviews. Monologues were more poisonous. The smile came more slowly. But there was also something freeing about it. He didn't have to follow the rules of The Tonight Show on CBS. He didn't have to live behind someone else. He could destroy the script if he chose to. And sometimes he did. Even more trouble was caused by this. There were rumors that Johnny had wanted things to go differently, even though NBC didn't say anything. Insiders in the business said he had quietly said he supported David. Not in public, but to people who asked. There was also more than just rumor. The people who knew him best agreed with it. This made the choice hurt even more because it felt like the crown had been stolen. A twist at the end of a story that had been writing itself for more than 10 years. The effects lasted for years. David never talked about it in great depth, but when he did, it was clear what he meant. A lot of wit wrapped up in bitterness. He made fun of it on TV, he talked about it in talks. There was something more serious going on behind the jokes, though. When you realize that no amount of skill or loyalty could get you the finish you wanted, Jay did really well on NBC. It was a good grade, people stuck around, and it looked like the network had made the right choice for a while. Respect, on the other hand, was something else. It was clear how people in the late-night class, comics and writers, felt. David had been treated badly. That was turned into fuel. He made a show that changed the way the room was used. David broke the rules, while Jay stuck to safe monologues and star Q&As. He made a structure based on Polish more open to attack. It became an art form for him to be weird. He was stronger because he wasn't trying to be Johnny anymore. Still, the hurt never went away completely. It was always there, just below the surface. He tried to fix the wound with jokes and cheers, but it never quite got better. He wasn't stuck because he couldn't move on. The wound was now part of the story. The quiet teacher. Johnny Carson didn't have a big farewell show when he left TV in 1992. Like he had done throughout his career, he walked off the stage with quiet ease and on his own terms. After that, he was gone. Johnny stayed mostly out of the public eye for the next 13 years. Nobody is going to be on any news shows or make public comments. He didn't do many interviews, didn't go to award ceremonies, and turned down almost every offer that came his way. For someone who used to run the radio waves, his loss was palpable. But something amazing was going on in the background. Now that he is the host of The Late Show on CBS, David Letterman continued to make his mark on the world. The format was not the same, it had a rougher tone, but the man who had been there before him had left his mark on the structure. Johnny had also found a quiet way to stay involved by writing. It went from being a small thing to doing it all the time. Johnny would sometimes write down a joke while watching David's show, a way to set up a joke and a way to end it. He would then fax it over. It would get to David usually through middlemen, but it would always be kept secret. He would use it most of the time. There was no credit or reason, just one great passing along his work to another. No one in the crowd knew. They laughed, but they didn't know that some of David's best one-liners were written by a man who is no longer famous. David never talked or gave hints about it. Because he respected Johnny so much, he couldn't make their private talk into a public show. It was personal, even holy. The messages came at random times. There wasn't a set time. Johnny wrote and shared whenever he felt like it. Some were written by hand and some were printed. Some of them were famous one-liners. Some had that obvious Johnny rhythm that made them stand out more. Set up, turn, and sting. For David, this meant something. Johnny had decided to be quiet in public, but he was still talking to himself. By making people laugh, being a good example, and building trust. This was even more important because Johnny wasn't sending anything to anyone else. Not to the new host of The Tonight Show or to the other up-and-coming stars on late night, just David. That was more powerful than any public support could have been. To be picked in that quiet way by the man who hadn't picked anyone else, that had a weight that not many people could understand. Also, it changed the way everything was seen. Behind the scenes, a different story was going on while everyone talked about numbers and rivalries. A lot of people thought that man had left the late-night world, but he was still changing it line by line through the person he never stopped believing in. After many years, David would finally tell his listeners this story. In 2005, not long after Johnny died, he started one of the saddest speeches he had ever given, letting people know the truth. He told the crowd that many of the funny jokes they had laughed at over the years had come from a man who still had the gift and wanted to share it, wrote a note by hand. There was no ceremony or signature. Everything changed at that time. People saw the show in a different way all of a sudden. Those jokes were more than just funny. They were still a live proof of a link that had stood the test of time, networks and politics, and a bond made of jokes. This relationship behind the scenes let the work do the talking. David took that work seriously, even though he was sarcastic and made fun of himself a lot. It felt very old-fashioned, something that is almost lost in the entertainment business today, where everything is shared, promoted, and sold. As it was the other way around. It was pure, quiet, and close. Johnny was still teaching David a lot of things, but not the way most people thought he would. He didn't tell him what to do. He was showing him what was important, that jokes were still king, and that a genuine laugh was the best way to show support. David also kept those messages. He kept their secrets safe. When he finally told them they existed, it was to honor a man he thought was perfect. What the Bible says. David Letterman and Johnny Carson were said to have a quiet admiration and deep mutual respect for each other for many years. The world saw a devoted student and a proud teacher, and until lately, David rarely changed that image, not even in his most honest interview. Now that David has started to think about his legacy, he is being more honest about it, telling the hard facts. At 78 years old, David Letterman finally told the truth about Johnny Carson in a talk that got the attention of people in the business and longtime fans. It's also not as good as we thought it would be. Johnny wasn't sure that I was the right person for the job. He is said to have said this while sitting with a friend on the set of My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, long after the cameras had stopped rolling. He even told me I might want to take a step back. The same person said that David talked a lot about the time before The Tonight Show changed hands that night. Johnny felt bad about his anger, as David put it. He wasn't sure if David's style, not the speech or the jokes, but the tone and energy, would work for a big crowd every night. The skill of making guests feel at ease and the willingness to work with the structure. Johnny was very careful, almost surgical. David was like Quicksilver. He was sharper, colder, and less dependable. David said that there had always been that difference. He was sure Johnny could see it. They never talked about the job in a direct way. That was not at all how Johnny worked. But now that he looks back, David sees his silence during that wild change as more than neutrality. It was a choice. Something. Reports say that David spoke with a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally realized that even the people we look up to don't have to fully support us. Admiration doesn't always mean faith, and that's fine. Even though he remembered the emails and quiet jokes Johnny had sent after he retired, he saw them in a different way. He liked what I did, he said, but maybe he didn't think I was right for what he made. That's not the same. A lot changed because of this small change, including how David treated his own show. During the same talk, he said that the Late Show's look and feel were purposely chosen to make it stand out. The less welcoming a place is, the colder the lighting and the deeper the blues. It was philosophical. It was a failure to seek comfort or warmth for its own sake. David was walking away from Johnny's shade by going the other way, even if he didn't know it at the time. Even though they were far apart, the link never broke. He didn't make Johnny look like a bad guy. His voice still had a tone of admiration in it. He said that he had shaped everything, but he finally saw the line for the first time. Johnny wasn't a fully committed teacher. He was there for them, but he was picky about who he helped. David now agrees that the difference between them might have been the reason why things went the way they did. It was said that he knew what that chair needed, and he might have been right. But I'll be honest, I will always be a little angry at him. It's really bothering me. That's me, though. John does not have anything to do with it, only my own fears. I didn't understand that until the day he died, which is sad. The end of things. You see, the showbiz world cried out loud when Johnny Carson died in 2005. Tributes were shown on TV, laughter artists told stories, everyone tried to figure out how big the hole he left was. David Letterman didn't rush to the surface, though. He didn't send a tweet. He didn't call any morning shows. He didn't say anything. Someone who knew him well at the time said that he spent most of that day by himself in his office at the Ed Sullivan Theater, reading old cue cards and going through a folder of speech jokes that Johnny had sent him over the years. Most of them were handwritten and were short, sharp, beautiful one-liners that looked simple on paper, but danced when they were read. He kept all of them. David didn't go to Johnny's funeral, at least not in public. There were only a few people at the service, which is what Johnny would have wanted. There were no cameras or recorders there. Only a few people who knew him personally were there. And David stuck to that line. He chose to remember him through the show because that was the only way he knew how. The next week, the tribute show aired. There were no guests or tricks. David was just sitting at his desk, thinking about a man he had chased and protected for most of his adult life. His voice was both sad and calm at the same time. He didn't start crying. He did not try to be emotional. He let the people in the room feel it for themselves. Then there was the show. He told them for the first time that not all the jokes they had heard over the past few years were his. They were Johnny's, sent and used in secret and never given credit. The crowd was shocked. Everything changed at that time. It made the competition and anger seem smaller and less important. It was the thread, the invisible line that connected The Tonight Show and The Late Show. It was made up of two guys who never said everything they needed to, but they said enough. People who worked with David a lot say that he changed a little after that. The edge got softer. It wasn't that he had nothing more to prove. It was just that the person he was always trying to prove it to was no longer there. A worker who has been there for a long time says that David once said, "The thing about Johnny is, he never explained anything. He just did it perfectly to show you how to do it. That was the lesson he kept with him. That's what he tried to respect. Just the standard, not the fame or the wealth." In the end, Johnny turned out not to be the teacher everyone thought he was. He was complex, careful, and human. As a student, a foe, and almost the next leader, David had finally come to terms with that. It wasn't perfect, what they said, but it was real. That may have been the most honest finish to Late Night ever. Do you still think they're together after hearing all of this? Share your thoughts below.